Hello everyone and very much welcome to Comsverse and of course to my crash course in task publishing in Microsoft Teams. Uh, Also, a huge thank you to the organizers of this event, including the sponsors making this event possible as well. So, my name is Adam Deltinger. I work as a Microsoft 365 service owner at Assa Abloy. I'm a Microsoft MVP since 2019 as well, and been working with Teams since I would say beginning of Teams. So, this session, what this is about, task publishing in Teams. So really, what is that? Because this is kind of something that many aren't aware of even exist, because you can't see it unless you actually configure it. And we'll talk more about that later. So what is it? That's a feature within Microsoft Teams with the ability to publish and track tasks in Microsoft Teams in an organization using a hierarchy model, right? And it utilizes Microsoft Planner app and the Task app in Teams, including that as well. And why do you want to do this? So you can make sure to kind of that you have teams that receive tasks via Planner and that you can also track them. So you want to make sure that, for example, I'm going to talk about use cases here in the next slide, but for example, you have retail stores or offices. You want to make sure that they actually accomplish these tasks you have published, okay? So what are some use cases here then? So there actually actually be anything, but some really obvious ones is, for example, retail stores and restaurants. So let's say you're an organization where you have retail stores, you have restaurants, you have any kind of stores, I would say. It could also be frontline worker teams, for example, and office locations and so on, where you want to, from a centralized standpoint, publish tasks and also track them. Okay, so kind of imagine yourself in your situation, in your organization, how this can be used. Okay, so looking at an example hierarchy and talking a little bit about terminology as well, because I'm going to do some demos later, and this is going to be easier when you actually know the terminology. And it might look from the first sight look a little bit like I would say complicated, but I would say it's fairly easy, both in terms of the actual terminology itself and the hierarchy model, but also when it comes to actually configure this. Okay, so this is an example, and I'm actually going to build this example later on as well. So as you can see here, we have a head office, okay? And then we are, in our organization, we have two branch offices. In this case, we have the West US branch office and the East US branch office. And at the bottom of the hierarchy, and this is important, at the bottom of the hierarchy, we have the teams that are going to receive the tasks, okay? So if you start looking at the top of this hierarchy, we have the root nodes, okay? In this case, it's the head office, okay? The root node, they can publish and they can track tasks. We can have several root nodes, okay? We can build several root nodes. It might be, you know, we have an HR, we have IT, we have marketing, and they all want to publish their own tasks to their own teams or to certain teams. And for the ones they publish, they can track the tasks and so on. In this case, we're going to make it easy. So we're going to have one root node. And then we have child nodes. Okay, they're the one underneath a team. Okay, underneath a node in this sense in the hierarchy. Going forward here, we have the leaf nodes, and the leaf nodes are the ones at the bottom. Okay. And we talk about tracking and publishing tasks using Microsoft Planner. So that kind of says it all about you need to have kind of a team that represents these nodes, okay? And that's true in the sense of in order to publish tasks, in order to track tasks, and in order to receive tasks, that needs to be a team. But it doesn't really mean that, for example, if you look at this hierarchy here, we can see that the West US branch office doesn't have this Teams icon on top of it. That means we can basically have this as a virtual node. It doesn't have to be a team. Obviously, we have a branch in the West US, right? But it doesn't have to be represented by a Microsoft Teams team. We can just use it to build the hierarchy and the actual way it looks. And then we can kind of use that hierarchy to filter what leaf node teams we want to publish tasks to. It's gonna make sense when I show the demo a little bit later on as well. But one thing that is very important to remember is that you can only publish tasks to leaf nodes, the one in the bottom of the hierarchy. And it's also important that you can only a team can only be represented once in the hierarchy, and you can have 15,000 nodes in a hierarchy, but they can only be represented once, and you can only publish tasks to leaf nodes. Another important thing in regards to terminology is the parent node. Okay, so as you can see here, I was talking about child nodes. Obviously, the parent nodes are the one above it. Okay, so head office is the parent node of West and East US branch offices, and the West US and East US branch offices, there are parent nodes to the leaf nodes in this sense. So, I mean, it might be a little bit confusing, but if you really look at it, it's not that confusing, really. All right, so here's an example from Microsoft, how it could look with, for example, several root nodes. So you can have, for example, the recall, we have the communications, we have the HR teams. They are in this hierarchy, they are root nodes. We have 3 of them here. And as you can see, they have more intermediate nodes as well. The East Regional Office, West Regional Office. They don't have to be Microsoft Teams team, but the ones that follow in the hierarchy, you can also have, if they are teams, I would say, they can also track teams to their respective teams down the line in their hierarchy. So if you look at this one here and look at the East Regional Office, if that is a Microsoft Teams team here, and we publish this hierarchy, that team can publish tasks to the New York store, the Boston store, the Miami store, or the New Orleans store as well. While the West Regional Office, their only child nodes here are the Seattle and Los Angeles store. So they can publish, the West Regional Office team can publish tasks to those 2 stores. Okay? But also remember here that the West Regional Office, for example, it doesn't have to be a team, but then it can't be used to track tasks or publish tasks. Okay. Moving on here. So talking a little bit about, okay, you mentioned this hierarchy. So what really is this? Because I've never heard of it. So it makes sense because you can't really see it. There's no like, click here to start building your hierarchy. This is done with a CSV file and you upload it with PowerShell. Okay. And don't get scared here now because it's fairly easy to do so, especially if you're just going to build this simple hierarchy. Obviously, if you have a very big organization and you want to incorporate all these nodes and you have several root nodes and so on, it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge, but it uses the same principles. Okay, so we have columns. When we talk about building this hierarchy, we're going to use a CSV file. And if you're a little bit familiar with a CSV file, you know it's basically a spreadsheet. You have columns and you have items within those columns. Okay, so there are 3 columns that are required. Okay, it's the display name, the parent name. Remember this from before. The terminology, and then we have the team ID, and the team ID is the same as the group ID in this case. Okay. The display name is the name of the team. The node you want to specify in the hierarchy. The parent name is basically the team above it. So then you kind of build these relationships. Then you know what to belong where. What teams are under marketing. What's are under the root node, so to speak. Okay, and the team ID is basically the group ID. You can fetch that in several ways. You can fetch that in the admin or Azure portal. You can fetch that via PowerShell. If you have multiple nodes, you can script that. You can even fetch it from Teams directly also. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, then some optional columns as well to further build on functionality here. We have the attribute columns and the bucket columns. As I said, they're optional, but I really recommend using them, and I'll show you why. So basically, the attribute columns are to be able to filter down on specific nodes that you're interested in. So let's see you have a bunch of retail stores in the East US and in the West US, and you only want to, for example, publish to certain stores. Building the hierarchy like I've showed you, I can actually filter on, I just want to publish to the retail stores on the West US branch offices. That belongs to the West US branch offices. And by adding some attributes as well to the stores, for example, you can say, I can add attributes as departments, for example. So I can specify certain departments are available only in certain stores. And so if I want to publish a task, so please remove this product, and let's say it's a pharmaceutical product, I just want to publish to those stores that actually have a pharmaceutical department, right? And then I can kind of filter this out, and I can see what teams are on the east or west coast, right, depending on where I want to publish them, and only to the stores that have a pharmaceutical department. The bucket column, I mentioned that it utilizes a Microsoft Planner plan that will be automatically created for all the teams you publish tasks to. You can choose to create buckets for those plans that are going to be created automatically. So in that case, when you publish a task or tasks, you can choose what bucket they will end up in. Okay. All right. So that was some really quick information, and I think it's time to get started and actually build this hierarchy I've been talking about now. All right, so now let's start building our hierarchy. And it's, as I mentioned, it's a CSV file, it's a comma separated CSV file. And for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to build this in Notepad because it works just as well. So I already predefined the kind of mandatory column, the display name, parent name, and team ID. And we're going to start off with defining our root node, the head office. So we're going to do that. And it's called the head office as a display name, this team. And since this is a root node, it does not have any parent name. It doesn't have a team above it. There's kind of the head, the root of the hierarchy, so to speak. It's the highest up. So we're just going to leave this empty, separate, over to the next column, which is the team ID. And you can, as I mentioned, you can fetch that in several different ways. Okay, so we're done specifying the head office. And now we're gonna define the branch offices. We're gonna add a new row here. And we have the East US branch office and the West US branch office as the display name for these. And as you can see, as parent name, I inserted the head office. And this is because the head office is above the East and West US branch offices in our hierarchy. If you have multiple root nodes, this could look differently, of course, but as you remember my slide earlier, as I showed you my example, this is how it looked. And of course the team ID here as well, defined for both of these branch offices. And now finally we're going to define our leaf nodes, the ones we're actually going to publish tasks to. So I'm just going to copy them over here. And as you can see now here, they are called as display name retail store - Seattle, retail store Oakland, New York, and Orlando, respectively. And as parent name here, I've defined for Seattle and Oakland, I've defined the West US branch office as the parent name there. And for the New York and Orlando, I defined the East US branch offices as the value for the parent name column. Okay, because this is basically how the hierarchy looked. If you remember my slide, the Seattle and Oakland teams, they were under the West US branch office, and New York and Orlando under the East US branch office. Okay, and then of course the team ID for our leaf nodes as well here. So this is actually done now. We can publish this now, but as I mentioned also, there are some additional columns you can add, and one of those is the attribute columns. And there's actually two different types of attribute columns, and of course the bucket columns to add buckets to our planners in our leaf nodes. All right, so we're going to add attribute columns, and we're going to add a mutually exclusive attributes column. Mutually exclusive means it's either this or that. It can't be both. So this could be anything really that relates to your use cases. But for example, let's say size, and we want to filter our retail stores based on size. And it's mutually exclusive. It can't be both big and small. It's either big or small, right? So we're just gonna name our attribute here. It could be whatever, right? And then under our leaf nodes, we're gonna define the value for size. So we do a comma, and then for this one in Seattle, we're gonna say it's a small store. For Oakland, it's a big store. And this one is small, and Orlando is big. All right, so we defined it. The next, we're gonna continue creating attribute columns, okay? And this one is not mutually exclusive. It could be either this or that or both, right? Or we could create a lot of different attributes if we want to. One example of this is departments, okay? So how do we do this in the most simple way? We're gonna do like this here. I'm gonna copy in here and add it to the columns. So we're gonna define the department attribute, so to speak. So then you insert the name of the attribute and then an optional value. So we have a pharmaceutical department. We separate with department, the value, with the colon, and then the name of the value. And comma, we're gonna add another attribute here. It's department, colon, we're gonna add a children's wear department. So let's say our retail stores have 2 departments at most. We can continue adding departments here if we want to. So how do we define the value for this for our retail stores? So we're gonna do this by entering either true or false. And we're gonna use zeros and ones. 0 for false, 1 for true. And we're gonna do this for every retail store we have. Of course, we're going to do a comma, and then we have department pharmaceutical. Is it true or false? It's false. It does not have a pharmaceutical department. And then we're going to define the children's wear. Does it have a children's wear department? Yes. So we're going to insert a 1. And we're going to do this for all of our retail stores using zeros and ones. So it can look something like this. So now we're almost done. We're just going to add another column, which is the bucket column. And you define buckets that are going to be created in the planners by using a hashtag and then the name of the column, name of the bucket, sorry. So we're going to use a colon here, comma there, and then a hashtag over here. So we're going to create a bucket called COVID-19. Then we're going to do a comma, and we're going to define another bucket called children's wear, and then yet another bucket separated with a comma, hashtag pharmaceutical. So it's just going to be, it's not going to be called hashtag pharmaceutical. It's just going to be called pharmaceutical. The hashtag is just to make sure that we define that and bucket attribute. All right, so we're actually done now. So what we can do now is to save this this file as a CSV file. We can name this TPH, Task Publishing Hierarchy.csv. We save it, and now it's time to upload it via PowerShell. All right, so I've now opened up a PowerShell prompt, and I have installed the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module and connected with connect-Microsoft Teams. So we're now ready to publish this hierarchy file I just created in Notepad. So I'm gonna do set-team targeting hierarchy. I'm gonna specify the file path for our CSV file. Like this, and I think we had that in C, temp, and then you would call it teams task watching hierarchy.csv. All right, so we just kind of got no good response. So what we can do here is that we can say something like get team targeting hierarchy status. Okay. So we can do that. And now we can see the status is actually successful. We can see the file name of our CSV and when it was last updated. In order to, you can only have one published, okay? But you can go back, you can edit the CSV file, and then you can just re-upload it the way I just did. And you can also remove it, so all of the features of task publishing will get removed in the Teams clients by doing a remove team targeting hierarchy, and it will be gone. Okay, it's as easy as that. All right, so now I'm in Microsoft Teams, and I am indeed a member of the head office, so I should be able to publish some tasks, right? So if I go to the tasks task by planner, I can now see published lists. I haven't been able to do that before, but since I'm a member of a team in the hierarchy and I've actually configured and published the hierarchy, it now exists for me. And as you can see here, we have the lists and we can create a new list. And in a list contains of one or multiple tasks, which is basically a planner task that will be published and published to all of our leave notes that of our choosing. Okay, so in this case here, you can see I've already published the task. We're going to create another one. So we click new list. We give this a name, my test list. And under published from, it's basically because if I'm a member of multiple teams that are able to publish tasks, I can choose from which one I want to publish these tasks. In this case, I'm only a member of the head office in this hierarchy, so I'm going to choose that and click create. All right, and here we create the tasks themselves that we want to publish, and we can do my test task, for example, and I can choose a priority. I'm going to select urgent. I can do a due date, tomorrow, and under bucket, I can now see the buckets that we defined in the hierarchy. So for example, children's wear, and we're going to create this task, and I can continue on creating tasks. And when I've created a task, I can go into it and add some additional information like notes. I can do a checklist item if I want to, add attachments and so on. Okay, so we're going to exit out of this now, and now I want to publish this list. So we're going to click publish, and I'm going to say select teams from a hierarchy. If I already kind of predefine all the teams I want to publish to that of course are part of the hierarchy, I can upload an Excel file. In this case, I'm going to select teams from a hierarchy. Now look at this now. This is the hierarchy we built, right? We have the head office at the top, we have the East US branch offices and the respective retail stores under the East US branch office, and the same for the West US branch office. I can select the individual retail stores now, I can select all of them, or I can use some filters. So we have the size attribute, and we have the options of big and small. So here we can filter. I only want to publish these tasks to all of our big retail stores. And then we have 2, right? If we select small, we have 4 of them, and we have 2 small, right? And we can also say we want this task, specific task list is about, removing some pharmaceutical products from the shelves. So there's no use to publish them for any retail stores that doesn't have a pharmaceutical department. So we're going to select pharmaceutical department and select all of the teams in here. There's one in the East US branch office and one in the West US branch office. All right, so let's do that. Click next and verify this. There's one task that's going to be published to 2 teams. I'm going to click ready. Everything looks good here, and click publish. All right, so depending on how many tasks you're going to publish, it will take some time, some minutes. But let's move over to another user that is indeed part of the East US branch office. I'm a member of this. And since I'm a member of the East US branch office, I can track tasks that have been published to the teams below me. In this case, I go to the Task by Planner app, and I can indeed now see the list, my test list, okay? And I can see the task in there, and I can see some information about the status of the task. I can see no one assigned anyone to this task, nor had this been completed. And this is on the individual task itself. I can go in and see some details about the task. I can change it because I am not the team that published it. I can go to the list report and see the whole list itself and the status of the list. Since can only see kind of what's on beneath me, I can only see the actual retail store New York in this case. And I can see here and on per list, per retail store information for each of these tasks. Let's move over to a retail store, and we're going to use the retail store New York, right? As you can see now here, there's a planner that has been created for this team.
And a manager now can assign the task that has been published to it and assign that to other workers. They can change the status of it. They can assign it to people and so on. And as you can see, I already published another list here with two other tasks, but indeed you can see the task that I just published. I can go in here, I can assign people to it, add labels. I can though not change the checklist, nor can I change the notes. Only the publishing team can do that. This is how you publish and track tasks with the use of task publishing in Microsoft Teams.
Okay, that was really a crash course, right? If you want more information, you can go to Microsoft Docs or you can go to my page, deltinger.com, where I posted 2 blog posts describing this in more detail. Of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter if you want to, if you have any questions and so on. But thank you so much for attending my session. Thank you, counselors, and have a great time of the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.